Okay.
There you go.
Okay, we're at Genesis 49, and we're at verse 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So let's look at Numbers 21:18. We're comparing this to these verses because, again, he's to be the lawgiver. In Numbers 21:18, the princes digged the well, the nobles of the people digged it, by the direction of the lawgiver with their staves. Now, isn't that interesting? And let's look at Deuteronomy 33. Again, this is a first mention in the Bible, so it's very important to know who has the authority to be a lawgiver. Again, Miss Clinton thinks she's an authority of her own, and she don't have to obey the laws. But I pray she's going to find out different real soon. Deuteronomy 33:21. And he provided the first part for himself, because there in a portion of the lawgiver was he seated. And he came with the heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel. Amen. Look at Psalm 60 in verse 7. Psalm 60 in verse 7. Gilead is mine and Manasseh is mine. Ephraim also is the strength of mine head. Judah is my lawgiver. Amen. There it is again. See? He's the lawgiver. And believe me, God's laws are so much more superior to your township laws and man-made laws. Because in the end, that man-made law can often be thwarted by paying a fine or a tax. And that's the purpose of a fine or tax. And license. License makes that which is unlawful legal. And that's why they want you to have a marriage license. They're telling you your marriage would be unlawful. That's a total lie. See? But it makes it legal. And it was done because at one time they didn't want whites and blacks marrying. And so they come up with this license idea to keep it from happening. But yet you buy their license, it makes it okay. You can't intermarry. And that's what the law reads. So you can intermarry. Well, wait a minute. I'm not interested in my sister. What in the world is you? Why'd you call it that, idiot? You know what I mean? Yeah. Of course, he says this again in Psalms 108, verse 8. Gilead is mine, Manasseh is mine. Ephraim also is the strength of mine head. Judah is my lawgiver. So usually the Lord don't stutter, but he's trying to teach us something if we can get it. Amen. Isaiah 33:22. Isaiah 33. 22. For the Lord is our, notice these three things now. It's very important because this is why our American government, when our forefathers wrote their Constitution, why they came up with this idea of three different branches of government, and each is supposed to be a check and balance to the other. See? It's not that one's supposed to be over the others like the Supreme Court thinks they are. Or even the executive president thinks he is. And wasn't it interesting how the WikiLeaks come out and they were sure talking, Miss Clinton and them sure were talking about Scalia's death 2 weeks before it happened. Holy mackerel. What's that about? Isaiah 33:22, for the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king.
Amen.
He will save us. See, there it is, the three branches of government. the judiciary, the legislature, and executive.
Amen.
Amen. And so when this pronouncement was made by Israel concerning his sons in Genesis 49 and verse 10, and he said, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. That means he would have his children and his posterity. It would go forward until finally Jesus, the true lawgiver, would arrive. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Amen? And he said that in that context there. Until Shiloh comes. See, speaking of Jesus being our Shiloh. He's the lawgiver, and he's the peace bringer. Amen. That's why he's called the Prince of Peace. And let's look at Deuteronomy 28:57. Deuteronomy. $28.57. And toward her young one that cometh out from between her feet, and toward her children which she shall bear, for she shall eat them from want of all things secretly in the season straightness wherewith thine enemy shall distress thee in thy gates. If thou wilt not observe to do all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, the Lord thy God. Again, here he's predicting that yes, they would have such dire straits of war and famine and difficulty that they'd even eat their own young. Which is the most horrible thought. Amen. To think that one would have to practice cannibalism. But they did. As a nation. And if I don't miss my guess, America's headed for the same direction. Unless God in His mercy reaches down to us and gives us a little stay of judgment. Until finally he, Shiloh, would come. And unto him shall the gathering of the people be. That's why he's going to set up his kingdom someday for 1,000 years. It'll be glorious. Amen. And everybody make sure to go in with the Feast of Tabernacles and celebrate the King's birthday, like Zechariah 14 speaks about. And of course, you got to remember now, where are they here? They're in Egypt. Well, will they finally get to go home someday? Yeah, it'll be about 400 years. I mean... But to think that someday they'll be back in their own land, living in their own homes again, not be strangers in this land of Egypt, would be a glorious thought. So when he would finally get to go back to Canaan land and live there, binding his foal unto the vine and his ass's coat unto the choice vine, they would find that the land of Judah, the middle part, in the land of Israel, you have a northern section around Galilee, and it was called Galilee. And in the middle, you have Judah, land of Judah. And it was hilly. And then at the very bottom, it's the Dead Sea desert area. And it's more desert. And this middle section of Judah, and where Judah would settle, would be a lot like Monroe. It would become known for a place of a lot of grapes and grape arbors, and raisins and Raisinville, and the Raisin River, and so forth, so on. And Israel's predicting how that, yes, and he'll be able to just tie his foal to a vine, because there's so many vines, and not just any vine, even the choice vine, because there's so much vine, there's so much grapes. And he'll wash his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes, because they're being so plenteous. There'll be plenty. If they're going to be working in and shipping out anything, it's going to be grapes. And so, because it is so plenteous, and his eyes shall be red with wine and his teeth white with milk. And so that's why he says those things, and it's the way he says them, because again, they're so plentiful that for sure they're without care when it comes to the matter of, do you need any grapes? No, I got plenty. So you could get grape jam and raisins and anything to do with grapes, Judah had plenty of. It was lavishly theirs when they would finally settle back into the land in the future. Not while they were living in Egypt, that's for sure. Okay, so now we pick up verse 13, Genesis 49:13. Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea. So when you look at the promised land, of course, somebody's got to live over along the coast of the Mediterranean, amen? And so the Bible tells us, Zebulun shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Very important port on the coast of the Mediterranean, because of the Phoenicians, well known in history as being the sailors that definitely knew their way around the world. And there's all kinds of signs. They were right here in Michigan. They've been all the way around the world a long time before Columbus. And in truth, many of the old maps that have been found that even show what Antarctica was like before the ice was there is because of these people. And that's why it's so fascinating and important to know the significance of these people that were seafaring people and what they said about the world throughout history. Because they definitely had more understanding than a lot of other people groups that never left their city, let alone went out on the ocean and got to really see what the whole world was like. And Dr. Bao, if you remember, when he speaks oftentimes, when he references history, he'll speak of the Phoenicians because, you know, they knew pretty well everything going on throughout history around the whole world. And so no doubt Zebulun would do trading with these people, because his border would go up to Zidon. Verse 14, Issachar is a strong ass couching down between two burdens. And he saw that rest was good, and the land that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. So again, when they came into the land, in the book of Exodus will bear out for us as we finally get them moving into the promised land and exit Egypt finally, after the many years of wandering, get into the promised land in Joshua, we'll see that rather than kick the Canaanites out, they were more happy to just pay the Canaanites a tribute, because he didn't want to work. Though he's strong enough, he could work and he should work. Because he's as strong as an ass. Yet he would rather rest. And so, and instead of struggling with an enemy, that is what he ended up doing. Okay, verse 16, Dan shall judge his people. Of course, that's what the word Dan means. Daniel means God is my judge. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards. So that seems odd, doesn't it? But we see that it was fulfilled in Judges 15. Let's go to Judges 15. Let's look at verse 20. Here you read about Samson being a judge. Of all people, it's Samson. He didn't have much of a following. God kind of used him as a lone stranger to take on all the Philistines by himself. And here's the story told of how that Samson killed heaps and heaps of 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass. And how he got thirsty after killing all them fellas. And so God had him pop a tooth loose on that jawbone, and that big jawbone acted as a canteen for him. There was water in it. So we're looking at Judges 15:18. He was sore athirst and called on the Lord and said, Thou hast given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant, and now shall I die for thirst and fall in the hand of the uncircumcised? But God clave a hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water thereout. And when he had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof Inachor, which is in Lehi unto this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. So this was Samson, and how Samson would fulfill this prophecy that Israel gave of his son Dan and of his tribe and his children, and how that someday Dan shall judge. Because Samson, old sonny boy, I'm sure that's what his grandparents called him, because we know the name Samson means what? Sunshine. Sunshine. So Genesis 49:16, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, an adder in the path, that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. Now, it's sad that when we speak of the tribes of Israel, some of these tribes backslid on God. And some of these tribes adopted idolatry. And that's why later, when Solomon dies, the northern tribes of Israel start the civil war against the southern two tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And that's why the southerners, when they read their Bibles, they said, well, the south has got to win, because the southern tribes, God let the northern tribes be carried off into apostasy first and then judgment and slavery. And the southern tribes were blessed of God because they loved God more than the northern tribes, and they did. The northern tribes quit coming to the temple in Jerusalem because they had to come to the south to do that. And so they made false gods, statues of cows, and they went and kissed the cows. The Bible says how they'd kiss the calves. And they would rather worship in Samaria, in the mountains, than go all the way down to Jerusalem and worship at the temple that Solomon had built. So there was a rebellion, there was a civil war. And so here clearly Israel is prophesying, and he said about Dan, that Dan would be like a serpent by the way, an adder in the path that biteth the horse heels, so that his rider shall fall backward. And when he said that, he was giving us some hint that Dan would be the first tribe to backslide away from God and fall into idolatry. The Bible's real clear. God don't want you to have any little dolly cues glued onto your dashboard. He don't want you to have no statues of Mary with a bathtub around them in the backyard or front yard or any yard.
Right.
God has always been against statues and statuary and idols.
Amen.
And of all the tribes, Daniel was the first. The tribe of Dan was the first. Now, some of you know this because you read your Bible. Look at Judges chapter 18. You remember this story. Here's the story given. And these Danites, sure enough, this fellow decides, I don't need to go down and worship God where God said to worship. I'll hire me my own man. I'll hire this kid here. I'll pay him money and I'll call him father. And so it's all in here. Just read this chapter when you go home tonight. He even makes him some little dollies of his own. Hires a man to make him some beautiful silver ones and different ones made of rare metals. And so sure enough, we see the introduction of idolatry to the 12 tribes of Israel happens through the tribe of Dan. So it's a very, very sad thing. And look at Judges 18, and we'll pick it up, I guess, at verse 30. You know, this is a tremendous chapter. Because this is telling us the story how that really, the story begins in chapter 17. There was a man of Mount Ephraim whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursest, and spakest of also in mine ears, behold, the silver's with me, I took it. It all begins with somebody stealing mama's money out of her purse. But in the end, she forgives him, you know, here we go again. And it's okay, sonny boy. I was going to use that to make you, give you something special. Oh, were you, Mom? And so the whole story's told here. How this guy introduces this idea of, well, I'll just make my own place to worship God. I don't have to go to where God said. In fact, I'll get a man of God, a Levite, and hire this kid to be my priest. And I'll pay him money. And so he makes him some special clothes to wear. This is where the Roman Catholic Church begins. It don't begin really in Rome. with Constantine. It happened way long time before that. It happened way back in Genesis, where the Bible tells us in chapter 11 about the Tower of Babel and Nimrod. This idea of worshiping some man and it being part of Baal worship. And his symbol would be a bull. And the idea of it being some woman who ends up marrying her son. And so Tammuz will be weeping because her son would be killed by a wild boar. And so after she cries over his dead body for 18 days, then magically he arises from the dead. And the Bible calls that the weeping of Tammuz. The Bible speaks of that's idolatry. God's people were to never do such things. But you know all kinds of churches that they've been doing this thing because they're doing it now every spring. And so every spring they have this time. And what is it they call it just before Easter? What is it called? Lent. The time of Lent. This 18 days of preparation for the Easter is all based on nothing Bible, nothing Christian. It's all based on Satan worship and Satan introducing this worship way back at the Tower of Babel. And the Bible speaks of it all the way through. And so since all the pagan nations of the pagan worlds all celebrated this, though the Bible calls this woman Tammuz and her husband Nimrod, each people group had a different name for him. Some called him Zeus, some called him Juno. And so when the Roman Catholic Church got going, they said, well, hey, all you pagan people, you can come on in and join our new denomination. But now don't call her Tammuz no more. Call her Mary. Right. And that's why you can go today to the nearest Catholic bookstore and buy the Catholic Almanac and open it up to the book of Revelation. And it'll say right in there, yes, someday, we as Catholics believe someday, like Revelation chapter 12 says, someday we teach that Jesus will marry his mother, Mary.
Queen of Heaven. Yeah.
The Queen of Heaven. Even Jeremiah 44 talks about how God was mad at the Jews. What's wrong with the Jews? They're practicing Baal worship. Well, what are they doing? They're making cakes to the Queen of Heaven. There's only one religion that calls their Christian woman the Queen of Heaven.
Yeah.
But again, it's a Bible term used for this Satan worship way back at the Tower of Babel. Well, it was easy for the Jews to pick this religion up once in a while, just like it's easy for you to pick this religion up. Because you live in America where people can have any religion they want. And so these people, a lot of these people, they're Catholics, so of course they practice the same pagan traditions as the pagans did. But to become a Catholic, they just had to rename their saints. Right. Every person that ever was a Vietnam soldier knows that when you were in Vietnam, the Buddhists were told by the Catholic Church there that, oh, you can become a Catholic, but that little baby, that little statue you hold that little woman holding her little baby in that statue, just call her name Mary and call that baby Jesus. Don't call him Nimrod, call him Jesus. And so it's so sad. It's just so sad. Because it's just a reconstituted paganism, see. And seeing God's always been against it. And so really, this is telling us how, and even the name of the guy that introduced and got, well, here's these soldiers, here's these Danite soldiers. They're supposed to be going around and kicking them Philistines and Canaanites out of the land. But they're a little lazy. They don't want to really work too hard like Israel prophesied there in Genesis 49. So what we're reading here is these Danite soldiers then, when they come along and find this guy set up his own little church house up here in the mountains in northern Israel, he got his own little two-bit priest. They say, look, would it be better for you to be the priest of one man or to be the priest of many men? I mean, that one man's giving you a little salary, but just think what we can pay you if you come with us. So they stole Micah's statues, they stole his priest, they loaded up and took off. And boy, Micah's mad, he takes off after them. But then all of a sudden, he finds them and he sees their swords and he decides, oh, that's okay, you guys need him more than I do. Go ahead, because these people are cheap. And you can buy them off easy, amen? That's why one time we had a sign that stood here and it said, not for sale. Amen. A lot of pulpits are for sale. And believe me, they'll go to the highest bidder. But no, we won't do that. See, that's why we're not in bed with the government as a church. We're going to stick with God. And we're not for sale. And we're definitely not interested in being a congressman. We would not step down from our high position as a preacher to become a congressman. God save us. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's definitely a demotion. So, Judges 18, it finally ends up in verse 30. And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. And they set them up, Micah's graven image, which he made all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. So we see this apostasy began, like Israel predicted it would, with the tribe of Dan. Isn't that sad? In other words, Israel could see a pre-dereliction in his son, that he wouldn't stay true to the faith. He'd get sloppy. He'd adopt the traditions of his neighbors around him, and then the next thing you know, they'd be off with the wrong God. Which is so true even today. Okay, well, we got to stop there. We're reading through the book of Genesis, slowly, verse by verse.